Welcome back to I Want That Too, the podcast where Disney merch meets Disney history. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and as always, I'm joined by the lovely Lauren Hersey.
Hey, Jim. We have a really exciting, a big show today. I'm really excited to dive in. We're going to be talking about sports, where some people might be really excited with the sports Disney crossover. We're going to be talking about Michael Eisner and his love of sports and how the iconic saying, "I'm going to Disney World," came to be. So I feel like we couldn't do a show about sports and Disney without bringing in my delightful husband, Eric Hersey, who's going to be joining us today for I Want That Too. Welcome, Eric.
Oh, it's fabulous to be here, guys. I will have my jersey on, and I'll be rooting for my favorite team on the big game.
Is it Mickey Mouse? Is that the favorite team?
That is my home jersey. And truthfully, either Mickey Mouse or at this point in time, there's a nice globe that I wear often too. So,
Oh, very cool. Okay. So, I have to ask, is there a particular team you are rooting for with this year's Super Bowl?
oh well, I'm a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. Lauren and I both kind of root for the Steelers, but they didn't make it that far. So normally we could say, well, we might go for the other team that's in Pennsylvania to root for. But I'm more of an AFC team, so I'll either any team from the AFC, I think I'm going to pull for.
Okay.
How about you, Jim?
To be honest, I'm more of a what are the commercials guy, though I have to admit, though, that I am kind of excited that Kendrick Lamar is going to be the guy in the halftime show because he actually has some very interesting Disney ties. I don't know if you remember this, but he actually wrote a song for Black Panther back in 2018 called All the Stars that actually got nominated for an Academy Award. And on the heels of that, he also went on to do some work for Black Panther Wakanda Forever, the sequel that came out in 2022. But I won't lie, Lauren. The other reason I really like Kendrick Lamar is you can go on Instagram right now and watch videos of Kendrick in the park, and he's a Disney nerd. All right.
Okay. Okay, now I'm okay with this now.
Okay.
Because I'm here for the halftime show typically, but I have to say I wasn't really familiar with Kendrick Lamar's music, and I certainly did not know he's a Disney friend.
Oh, good. No. He is one of us. There's one video of him at DCA where Goofy comes up and immediately focuses in on his shoes and brushes them, and Kendrick loves that. And then, but there's a companion video where he's now in Florida at Hollywood Studios, and he's thrilled to be hanging out with Woody back in Toy Story Land. So again, he's one of us. Watch the Super Bowl to watch a Disney nerd sing, okay?
All right, I'm here for it then, and hopefully he'll bring along his pals because I did read that he's gonna have some friends in his posse. I just wasn't familiar. Eric, did you know who Kendrick Lamar was? Did you know about Black Panther?
I did know about Black Panther. That is truthfully how I learned about him for the first time. So, and I did enjoy that album. So I was familiar. I could not pick him out of a lineup, but I will after this big game. So.
Yes. So we are here for you, Kendrick Lamar. And though I'm not the biggest of sports fans, I am a fan of the commercials, like you had mentioned earlier in the show. Now, it was a little bit more personal for me because my background is in television. And so, I mean, I've been in corporate now, but I was in a TV station for a lot of years. And it was a big deal when you got the Super Bowl because of the commercials. I mean, like, you it's like millions of dollars, $7 million this year for a 30-second spot in the Super Bowl. And though it wasn't as large at the local level, it was still the most that we got for a commercial all year long. So that was always exciting and a lot of pressure too.
Oh, no, absolutely. And then what's interesting for me is the notion of it wasn't just what it cost to buy an ad in the Super Bowl, but there was also jockeying. For example, you really wanted to be in the first half. In fact, truth be told, you wanted to be in the first quarter, right? Because the interesting thing is you get tens of millions of people watching this thing. For example, the Super Bowl that just ran last year, 123 million people tuned in. But most of them hang in there till the halftime show. And then they kind of, depending, especially what the score is, and if it turns out to be a blowout, they wander away. So you pay the big money for the ads up front while they're still involved, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think I'll remember it as long as I live. Like, so if you're buying commercials locally, here's some inside baseball for you, is you only get certain ad breaks. And so we only ever had one ad break in the first half that for local commercials. Obviously, the network is selling them. We had one going into halftime, but we got one at the end of the game and then one in the post game. And all the businesses that would get in those breaks would always be, they'd be mad the next day. You know, we tried to rotate them, but it was always challenging because you only have, 3 commercials that you can put in the first half of the game.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah. No, I just, again, for me, it was always amazing. It really started in the 80s and 90s where people would put all sorts of effort into Super Bowl ads. In fact, I remember the Air Jordan ad with Bugs Bunny, which made such an impression. Warner Brothers turned around and made a movie based on the commercial. That hadn't happened before. But again, a Super Bowl ad is a special thing.
it is. I have to ask, Eric, do you have a favorite Super Bowl commercial?
Hey, I was a veteran working for Wendy's for many, many years. So Where's the Beef is certainly one of my favorites. Now, I wasn't alive when it ran, but that is a testament that has lasted through
It
time.
has. And God bless Clara Pell. She moved a lot of beef for that fast food chain. Yeah, where's the beef?
No, and I have to say, though, like, I feel like, I don't know, the last couple years, maybe we just are not patient at all as a society. But now I feel like the Super Bowl commercials are kind of getting teased or leaked, in advance of the actual Super Bowl, and we were talking a month ago about Christmas. Like, Christmas started in October this year. Like, we just are not patient and we can't wait. And before we got started, we were chit-chatting about Disney's new cruise line commercial and how adorable it is. And I'm wondering if it just came out in more of a long form because they have plans to run it in the Super Bowl.
Oh, that's intriguing. Yeah, we'll have to wait till the 9th and see if that actually pans out.
We'll have to wait and see. And if you have not watched the commercial, please do, because I want merch for this commercial. I need this little lonely towel in my wardrobe now.
Wow.
I was going to say, I could probably go to the closet and find a nice white towel.
I was about to say, it's like, wow. But okay.
Disney has the power to sell that, though. That's the thing, is they probably could put a white towel, do this, and mark it up, and here you go.
This is true.
$29.99.
There you go.
Okay, on that note, we do have to pay our bills around here to afford these luxuries. So, Jim, why don't we go ahead and thank our wonderful sponsor?
That we will. And this episode of I Want That Too is brought to you by our friends at Be Our Guest Vacation. Then planning a Disney trip, these folks are the real deal. As a Platinum-level Earmarked travel agency, Disney recognizes them as one of the best. Their expert agents handle all the details, so you just show up and enjoy the magic. And by the way, it's not just Disney. They've got you covered for Universal, for cruises, and more. And the best part is, Be Our Guest Vacation services are completely free. So head on over to beourguestvacations.com and let them take care of everything. So, okay, so now to get to the news portion of today's I Want That Too. And again, continuing our Super Bowl take on things. We're talking about Michael Eisner now, is that right?
Yeah, well, I feel like we can't talk about the feature of today, which is, I think it happened on Michael Eisner's watch, and I'm sure you're going to tell us about, that iconic statement that the players that win the Super Bowl say, I'm going to Disneyland or I'm going to Disney World, without talking about Eric and I's version of Walt, who is Michael Eisner, because, he was the dude when we were growing up. Like, that's who we saw on TV. And Michael Eisner, he was not just passionate about the Super Bowl. And so I'm hoping that you guys will be able to share some of the things that we have today through the Disney company and their tie to him. Eric was just telling me that he has a baseball card. Or he had baseball cards?
He bought into Topps. So Michael Eisner Post, he just sold those off, I think, last year. But he was big into trading cards, which if you're into merchandise, that's my kind of merchandise. I got boxes of trading cards, and even some Disney trading cards. So that's my thing. But no, Michael Eisner did a lot more than that.
Wait. I have to time out real quick. Disney has trading cards?
Oh God, yeah.
No, yeah. When I was a kid, I have Darkwing Duck. I got all types of trading cards. There's all types of cards out there.
And in fact, what was it, 1990? Was that? No. It was the 95. They actually had, for that year, for the 40th anniversary of Disneyland, they gave out 40 trading cards, and the only way to get them is you had to enter the park 40 times that year to collect the cards. But yeah, that there were people who passionately pursued that whole set. So yeah.
Okay, I have to ask though, because I'm sure one of you guys know. So what was it that when Michael Eisner joined the company in, I believe, 84, what was the first taste that Michael Eisner got into sports to say, maybe we should be doing more of this?
Well, all right, Eric, help me out here. One of the things you really need to understand about Michael Eisner is that he had his 3 sons. And who were in sports. So, for example, Michael, the Mighty Ducks sort of came about because one of his kids was playing hockey, and Michael spent a lot of time sitting in very cold ice arenas watching his kid practice. And Michael would go into work, and it was at Breck's hockey game, and what's going on hockey-wise? How much do they make? Go do some research. And suddenly Disney has its own NHL franchise, the Mighty Ducks. That was 93, right? But
yeah, it's not only that. I think I don't know when the movie came out, but it was real close to when it was created.
True.
That was the expansion draft in 1993.
This is
and then the movie came out, and I believe, every kid in my class probably had a Mighty Ducks jersey. And like I said, I lived in Ohio. So
yeah, and that was the other thing. Michael was paying very close attention to, it wasn't just the teams that made money. It was, for example, the venues. In fact, it was kind of interesting when Disney acquired the Anaheim Angels. Disney was just as excited about getting their Angels Stadium. In fact, Eric, at some point, we really need to drill down into that story on some podcast because, for example, Jim Schul was telling me the story about, how Disney took that stadium and literally pulled out seats so that they could build rock work and waterfalls and hide all of the equipment that whenever they got a home run, they could fire off fireworks inside of the stadium. But the whole notion was that Disney was about, we're entering this space where families are. They don't just go to theme parks, they go to sports games. And so what can we do to make people that much more excited about the Mighty Ducks or the Anaheim Angels? Because again, we want them buying their merch as well and walking around wearing the hats and the Spirit jerseys and the like.
Yeah, and they had a movie there, Angels in the Outfield.
They did.
It was
They
just,
did.
Yep.
I was just going to ask, is that's the same?
All I'm going to say is I learned how to play a lot of sports early on by like Tony Danza threw a heck of a knuckleball or whatever. And I'm like, this is how I kind of got into sports. It got you involved through these movies that were aimed directly at, elementary boys and girls. So not only that, we bought their clothes. Like, that's what I'm saying.
Do you think he just wanted to be like a cool dad?
Well,
we can make money, be a cool dad, kind of be the hero.
Well, and now on a parallel track, though, Michael Eisner was a very savvy businessman. I mean, for example, he was looking at what happened at Walt Disney World in January after the holidays were over. And that used to be a really slow time of year where they had hundreds of hotel rooms on Disney property that were just not filled. And at one point, he learned about what happened in New York when they held their marathon in the fall, a time after the tourists had gone home. But suddenly all these people came to town and booked hotel rooms so that they could run a New York marathon. And Michael was, I see. And that's why in 1994, we got our very first Walt Disney World Marathon, which was held deliberately scheduled for January during the slack period. And that over the past, 30 years has now grown into this amazing revenue stream for the company. And let's not even talk about, when Disney bought ABC, and ESPN was just sort of in there in the pile. And, it was only later that became the real crown gem of Disney's broadcast. I mean, the money that it made from cable systems around the country, because it's like, oh, you want ESPN 1, ESPN 2, ESPN Classic.
The Ocho.
There we go. Yeah. Now, mind you, not everything has worked out the way Disney had hoped to. They did open their Wide World of Sports in 97, and they kind of learned the hard way that it's one thing to build a wonderful sports complex. And by the way, you've never been there. It's beautiful. But it's quite another thing to schedule enough events to keep it up and running 365 days a year. I mean, these days, it's got events in there maybe 100 days a year. And Disney has explored of a lot of ideas to potentially get more people to come there. In fact, I remember at one point there was a plan to build a giant professional bowling complex right there at the edge of the parking lot, with the notion that during those times when they weren't holding track and field events or the Braves weren't there for spring training, that they could then hold bowling tournaments, but also it could be something thrown open for guests to do on say rainy days.
Yeah, I mean, so we ended up getting Splitsville. I guess you can't win them all. And wasn't there like a NASCAR track or something at Disney World?
Len and I actually talked. I think we did 3 shows about this last year, and what ironically did the IndyCar track in at Walt Disney World is they built a wonderful facility right there in the parking lot for the Magic Kingdom. But what ended up happening is nobody at Disney had put it together that race cars are loud. And all of these people who paid top dollar to stay at the wonderful Wilderness Lodge, where it's supposed to replicate the peace and the quiet of being at a national park. And for the race weekend, you were there next to the 100-foot tall totem poles hearing.
Hold on, that's going to sound like the Magic Kingdom over in Frontierland in a couple years, right?
I don't think they thought that through either. There's a lot of Disney sports related stuff, and a lot of but also there's a lot of amazing merch that they made for these various teams that Disney owned for a while, and you can find a ton of it on eBay these days.
Yeah, I mean, Eric, do you still have your little Mighty Ducks jersey?
Well, at least I have a second grade picture where I was wearing it, and so I know for a fact that at least I had a school picture with a Mighty Ducks T-shirt or jersey there. But no, this a lot of vintage, and that stuff is almost coming back. I've started seeing people actually buying starter jackets again. So I mean, that was one of the cool things to have a starter jacket that was one of these teams. So would
Is
love
that what they have at Universal Studios? There's like windbreaker. Like, is that like a starter jacket?
No, it's just a windbreaker, but I love that. From a merch perspective, there's no reason I'm not buying that next time.
You know,
But
it's so interesting you guys bring up the merch side of this, because this actually brings up a very controversial aspect of the marathon weekends. Remember, there are now multiple marathon weekends, but you know how when you go, well, again, you guys went to your very first D23 Expo this year, and what was always fascinating is the people who'd pay at the sorcerer level could get into the stores at the D23 Expo early and effectively clean out all of the really good collectibles and then go home and put them up on eBay. And this has begun to happen at these marathon events, that people will go in and buy up all of the gear and then go back to their hotel room and put it up online to sell for eBay to running enthusiasts around the country, which infuriates the people who were down there. It's like, I paid thousands of dollars not only to get into this race, but to get to my hotel room and to bring my family down to cheer me as I run through the parks. And I just want some swag to take home for bragging rights so I can walk around the office with my Disney Marathon windbreaker on. And what do you mean you're clean? You opened 5 minutes ago. It's like, well, I'm sorry, but the early buyers came in and grabbed up everything. And on the other hand, if you go on eBay, you can get the shirt you're looking for a couple of $100. So, joy.
Well, if you plan ahead for the Princess Half Marathon that is coming up, we did get a sneak peek of some of the merch, and I will say that I'm going to tell you the dates because there's going to be a Run Disney Health and Fitness Expo.
There we go.
That is February 20th, 21st, and 22nd that you can get some of these items. So it's not going to be you got to pay extra to get in, but they are a virtual queue, so you gotta have a quick trigger finger. And it looks like what they have going on for the Princess Marathon, little different because we got princesses and villains. I can talk merch all day, every day. Sports, hit or miss. But the spirit jerseys, like you've got the princesses, but you also got the villains kind of looming. You have mini headbands, same thing. Like think Snow White and the Evil Queen, like that. There is an iridescent windbreaker with the Run Disney 2025 logo. So some cool stuff if you just want to get your hands on some of that merch or you're planning to go down for the race. Did Eric and I, Eric's coworker, they just got back, and I think Michael, he ran the Dopey, right?
Dopey,
Eric?
yeah. And
Wow.
I don't know if you guys ever, I mean, I was at their house once and saw their display. They did a nice little display of all the medals. I mean, those medals, they're immaculate. They're so cool. I mean, it makes me want to actually run.
Well,
get one of those.
No, you've nailed it in one. That is one of the things about the Disney World and the Disneyland Marathon. There's a lot of people who will run these things just to get those beautiful looking medals because they're stunning.
Not me. I'll be buying it on eBay.
Oh.
Sorry. Okay. So when we come back, we're going to take a quick break and then we're going to Disney World or Disneyland or wherever we are. Actually, we're just going to listen to Jim's feature about the Super Bowl. So stay with us. And we're back. All right, Jim, take it away. Tell us how we got the iconic saying that we all know and love and maybe are jealous of.
Okay, well, and what Lauren is referring to is, of course, that moment at the Super Bowl where the quarterback from the winning team turns to the camera and says, I'm going to Disney World or Disneyland. So how did this Super Bowl tradition get started? And what's interesting is it can be tracked all the way back to January of 1987. And by the way, this phrase wasn't uttered for the first time inside of a football stadium, but actually it was said backstage at a Disney theme park at a dinner table during a casual conversation with Michael Eisner and George Lucas. And yes, that George Lucas, the Star Wars guy. Okay, so how does this tale get started? Again, we are literally taking off in a weird direction, because how many do either of you remember the Rutan Voyager?
No.
No, hard no.
Sorry, Jim.
Okay.
You're going to have to explain.
Okay, this is the very first aircraft to fly around the world without stopping or refueling. Okay, now mind you, it took 9 days, 3 minutes, and 44 seconds to do this, not to mention the combined efforts of two very brave and ultimately very tired pilots, Dick Rutan and Gina Yeager. And Dick and Jean, they took off on December 14th, 1986, aboard this experimental aircraft, left Edwards Air Force Base out in the Mojave Desert, and then just kept going west. It circumnavigated the globe at an average height of 11,000 feet. And by the time the Voyager touched down again at Edwards Air Force Base, now on December 23rd, it had flown over 26,000 miles. And so as soon as Voyager safely gets back on the ground, Rutan and Yeager are feted as American heroes. In fact, just 6 days later, after they climb out of this thing at Edwards Air Force Base and finally can stretch, they're in Washington, D.C., at the White House, no less, where then President Ronald Reagan presents Rutan and Yeager with a pair of Presidential Citizen Medals on December 29th. So, again, very big deal. But we now jump ahead 2 weeks to January 12th, 1987. And the original Star Tours attraction is now opening at Disneyland Park in California. And look, the PR department at the Walt Disney Company, especially when it comes to these high-profile futuristic rides like this, they have a certain playbook that they like to follow when it comes to promoting things like Star Tours. Take, for example, when the original Space Mountain first opened at Florida's Magic Kingdom, this would have been January 15th, 1975. They wanted to be sure that this brand new Tomorrowland thrill ride would get as much free publicity as possible. So the Mouse's marketing department, they don't just release balloons or fire off daytime fireworks or arrange for a 2,000-member marching band. They also invited 3 really for real astronauts, Gordon Cooper, Scott Irwin, and Scott Carpenter. And they took part in the Space Mountain dedication ceremony. Now, if we jump ahead to when Disneyland's version of Space Mountain opens in Anaheim in May of 1977, this time around they invite 5 actual astronauts. They got Cooper and Carpenter back, but they're joined by Deke Slayton, Wally Schirra, and now Senator John Glenn. And all those people come out to Southern California, again, to take part in the dedication of this thrill ride. And by the way, if we just leap really forward to August of 2003, when Mission Space opens at Epcot Center. This time around, the marketing department pulls out the stops. They arrange to have astronauts from every phase of America's space program. We're talking Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, the Space Shuttle program. Those guys, people representing all of those, are in the park that night. Disney then brings up on stage Buzz Aldrin, the second man to walk on the moon. And then, just as the capper, Michael Eisner turns to a giant video screen, and they then go live to the International Space Station, where 2 of the guys up there are like, well, I hope your ride goes well. All right, so long story short, this is what Disney does. When they have a futuristic thrill ride, they like to have a few really for real astronauts on hand.
Like, I'm wondering, are we sending the the winners of the Super Bowl to space?
Well, in this case, what they did was, again, we're back now to Star Tours. Again, opens January 12th, 1987. And again, Disney's marketing department does what it always does. It invites astronauts Gordon Cooper and Deke Slayton to take part in. They did a 60-hour-long party at Disneyland for the opening of Star Tours. But and by the way, just in case you're wondering, yes, Michael Eisner did in fact use a lightsaber to cut the ribbon at the opening ceremony. So, but anyway, because it's only been like 10 days, 2 weeks since Dick Rattan and Gina Yeager circumnavigated the globe, Disney felt like, oh, let's invite them too. They did something cool that involves flying, and that's sort of Star Tour-ish. So they're there too at the opening ceremony for Star Tours. But all right, anyway, so we're now, the ribbon has been cut. And the celebrities go backstage, and they're having a quiet dinner with cocktails while the craziness is still going on in the park. So picture this. We're backstage, quiet space at Disneyland. Dick Rattan and Gina Yeager are sitting at a table. Michael Eisner, with his lovely wife, Jane, who's very important to the story, so remember that. They come over to the table with George Lucas, and they introduce themselves, and they all sit down, and Michael can't help himself. These people have done this amazing thing. So he just starts off, it's like, you guys just made history. You traveled nonstop around this planet on a plane without ever refueling. I mean, how are you ever going to top that career-wise? I mean, what are you two going to do next? And Gina, she pipes up and says, well, to be honest, after being crammed inside of that teeny tiny plane for 9 days, I'm just happy to be here anywhere else. And you folks were nice enough to fly Dick and I here, invite us to your party. So look, as soon as we're done eating, I'm going over to the park and ride some rides. I'm going to Disneyland. And Jane Eisner is sitting at Michael's elbow at the table, and she hears that. And it's like, oh, that's a really good slogan. I'm going to Disneyland. And so she and Michael are in the car going home that night from, again, the opening of Star Tours. And she does what every smart wife on the planet does. It's like, did you hear that? Did you hear that? I'm going to Disneyland. That would be a really good slogan. You should use that to promote the parks. And Michael, being like every husband on the planet, the first time your wife says something really smart to you, immediately dismisses. No, that's a dumb idea. We don't want to do that. No. But Jane persists. All right. And finally, after a couple of days at home, Michael comes around. And so it's Friday. Okay. Friday, January 16th. Just a couple of days after Star Tours first opened. And Michael goes into work and he tells his senior staff about Jane's idea. And then it's like, all right, yeah, that's an interesting slogan. But who would we have say this and where? And then somebody in Eisner's office says, well, the Super Bowl, and by the way, this is the 21st edition of that championship game. It's being held this year out here in Southern California. In fact, just up the street from Disney Studios over at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. And also, it's 2 weeks away. I mean, it's going to be held on Sunday, January 25th.
Sounds like kismet to me.
Well, no, that's it exactly. And so, Disney's PR team was like, wait a minute. What if we got the quarterback of the winning team, as soon as the Super Bowl is over, to turn to a camera on that live broadcast and say, I'm going to Disneyland? And by the way, Michael Eisner actually tells this story in his memoir, Work in Progress, Risking Failure, Surviving Success, which, by the way, Random House published, first published back in September of 1998. And pointless bit of trivia here, the very first story that I wrote for the web specifically was a review of Work in Progress, and that was published over on The Dig That was Al Lutz's old Disneyland information guide, the precursor to Mouse Planet and Mice Age. And that got posted the very same week that Eisner's book hit store shelves. By the way, further weird bit of trivia here. Michael Eisner chose his co-author of Work in Progress, journalist Tony Schwartz, because Michael thought that Tony had done a really good job ghostwriting Donald Trump's memoir, The Art of the Deal, back in 1987. So, just again, I know we didn't think we'd talk about the current president of the United States in today, in a stories about I'm going to Disneyland, but and the Super Bowl, but here we are.
I also didn't think we were going to be talking about spaceships and a flight around the planet.
There we go. There we go.
Donald Trump's just one more happy surprise.
No, it is such a strange story. But anyway, to get back to how they pulled it off. Disney first had to get clearance from the NFL and CBS, the network that was broadcasting the Super Bowl that year, for this bit of post-game publicity. They then reached out to Phil Simms, the quarterback of the New York Giants, and John Elway, the quarterback of the Denver Broncos, and basically said, look, if you're willing to do this at the crucial moment, should your team win, turn to the camera and say, I'm going to Disneyland or I'm going to Disney World, we will give you $75,000. And what was interesting is Phil Simms was initially, no, I'm not going to do that. No. And then he heard that John Elway said yes. And it's like, oh, well, all right. If he says yes, I'll say yes. But anyway, turns out Jane Eisner had come up with a great idea. That year's live broadcast of the Super Bowl was the second highest viewing audience in television history for that time anyway. 87 million people tuned in to watch the broadcast, and they heard Phil Simms say, I'm going to Disney World. And then the very next day, Disney takes that clip of Simms saying that and cuts a commercial, which then gets broadcast nationally, and a Super Bowl tradition was born. And speaking of traditions, and I know you'll love this, Eric, again, this is Super Bowl 21, the one that was held in 87. It's also in the record books as being the very first time that the winning coach was given a Gatorade shower. And I'm sorry, I don't know how much Gatorade paid the New York Giants to do that. But one last bit of trivia associated with the origins of the Super Bowl tradition, and given all your years in television, you'll appreciate this, Lauren. Okay, it's a minute before the game ends. The Giants are about to beat the Denver Broncos 39-20. And Simms is standing on the sideline when he feels a tap on his shoulder, and he turns around and there's the Disney camera crew. And the segment producer is trying to communicate to Simms over the roar of the crowd. It's like, look, we need you to say, I'm going to Disney World and then I'm going to Disneyland 3 different times, because we need different takes when we get into the editing bay. And so Simms does this. So that's how they were able to do a commercial that actually got tailored for both the East Coast and the West Coast. So there you go.
Jim, do you know, you blew my mind a little bit because all these years, I had no idea it was a marketing campaign.
Oh, yeah.
Eric, when you were young and you saw this, did you ever think that this was essentially a glorified commercial? I had no idea.
No, but I also thought Bugs Bunny and Michael Jordan were real playing basketball in the commercial. Right. So as a kid, not necessarily realizing the marketing ploy, but I didn't know they did it 3 times each. That is funny to know that it wasn't just one take kind of deal. That's interesting.
No. Again, this was the thing. They had to get it. They had to have choices, and more to the point, they had to have that visual of him there on the sideline, the Rose Bowl around him. This is authentic. This really happened, and that's what he said. I'm going to Disney World, and I'm going to Disneyland.
Well, thank goodness for Jane Eisner. You get it, girl. You keep on telling your husband what's up. On that note, I do think that it is time to close up shop for today. Eric, thanks for being a part of today's sports and Disney crossover episode. And if you, as our listeners, want to stay up to date with all things Jim Hill Media Network, then just make sure you're following along on Facebook, Instagram, X. We make sure to put everything on the social feed so you won't miss a thing. And while you're at it, leave us a review. It means a lot. It really helps the show. And, it shows us that you like what we're doing.
That is true. And don't forget, if you have questions or suggestions about future episodes of I Want That Too, Laura and I would, of course, love to hear from you. And you can reach out to us on social media or email us directly. I'm at jim@jimhillmedia.com. And Lauren, you're Lauren at laurenhersey.com, right?
That is correct. And I think that's it for today's episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on I Want That Too.